Cool. How's it going?
Not too bad. You?
Not too bad. We before starting recording, we're just complaining of how hot it is. That issue is continuing here.
Yeah, I'm totally not looking forward to later in the summer here in Montreal where it starts getting humid, but it's pretty good here so far.
Nice. Yeah, I've only been to Montreal in the summer, and it was like brutal hot. And I don't know. Like I growing up, my mom is from Ontario,
Mm.
kind of St. Catharines area, the Golden Horseshoe, if
Yeah,
you will.
yeah,
And so I'd spend the summers in Ontario every year, and I just remember it was like my view of Ontario was that it was this incredibly hot, humid
yeah,
place because
yeah,
so rarely went in the winter, right? And same with Montreal. I mean, it's weird. There's ice storms and stuff, and yet
yeah.
the summers are so brutal. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of humidity here, so yeah, during we get tons of snow in the winter, and I guess it's just like disgusting in the summer, which I haven't really had to
It's your
deal with
first
that
summer,
for
right?
a while. Like, obviously, I lived in Toronto several years back and dealt with it then, but honestly, even when I was in Australia, like it got up to around 40 degrees Celsius, but it was pretty dry if I remember, at
Dry,
least in the
yeah,
summer.
interesting.
And
Hmm.
then yeah, Vancouver was like nothing, uh,
Yeah,
and San Francisco was in its own weird little bubble. So yeah,
yep,
this is potentially going to be my worst summer in years.
yeah. Uh, you, I'm sure it's not just my experience in Asia is quite limited, so I always talk about Japan. I'm sure it's like this in
Mm.
a lot of Asia, but like Tokyo, oh man, the summers are like kill me. So I went through a few of those. That wasn't too fun. But it's been quite a while since I've really gone through one of those summers. It gets hot here though, man. Like seriously, like uh, it was like 100 a few years back. In obviously magic numbers, so
I
and
was-
maybe that's 40
it
in
it
real
doesn't
temperature. I don't really know.
it doesn't matter how often I hear Fahrenheit. Whenever I hear someone say 100, I always think of boiling point.
It's kind of yeah. Well, yeah. I've for better or for worse. I mean, I've thought of Fahrenheit as the stupidest thing in the whole universe my
Yeah,
whole entire life. And when I moved to America, it was like, well, people use it, and I still, when people say it's 70, it's 80, I have no idea what they're talking about. So I
yeah.
should force this upon myself. So I set everything like my phone is in Fahrenheit, and it's interesting working in tech because I mean, not that many people are like born and raised in the United States, so like everyone you talk to, they talk Celsius.
Right.
They so I'm glad I still understand real temperature, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
if you were working in, somewhere where you had to perform calculations of, like JPL or NASA or something, you'd be using the metric system as well, right?
Well, I hope so. Uh, yes, but anyhow, we digress. We should jump into today's topic.
Exactly. So when was the last time you died in a video game?
uh,
You were playing
I'll hop
Contra recently, right?
I'll hop right on to another digression. So my daughter recently, I think I've been mentioning this a bit back, but she's been taking kind of an interest in. I don't know if it's that she's interested in like games, but like just I don't know. She knows that the Nintendo is something you turn on, and then I use the controller to make stuff happen on the screen, and it's like
Yeah.
so much fun for her to watch. So I try and pick games that are just like I'm not gonna try and play an RPG or something because
Yeah.
it's always like she gets bored and wants to change the game in 15 minutes, and so I've been playing through Rockman X, the original,
Nice.
and I'm almost at the end now through a whole bunch of little sessions with her. Not with any. It started without me really trying to beat the game, but I realized, well, I'm playing this so much, I might as well start saving the passwords.
Yeah.
So, uh, a lot. I mean, well, it's not like a brutally hard game, but like some of the bosses without the secret weapons are no fun. I don't.
Yeah.
You've beaten it, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
totally. Like if you haven't played that in a while, you're obviously gonna forget all the magic places that there's enemies and stuff, and you're gonna lose health. And
Power ups. Well, do you remember the spider boss?
yes, I hated that one.
Ah, my
When I was a
God.
kid, I had a really hard time with that.
Yeah, that's no fun at all. I haven't. I've heard like I don't know. There's like tricks, but I'm just trying to beat it, and it's
Mm,
like I wasted I think 6 straight lives last night. That wasn't too fun.
nice. Well, I was just gonna say when I was a kid, I could not beat that game. It wasn't until I was an adult and they re-released like the whole collection on either I think I got it on GameCube. Uh, and it
Hmm.
wasn't
Ah, yeah.
until I was like 26 or something and playing it then that I was able to actually take it all the way from start to finish.
I don't know if I beat it when I was young. I don't remember like the ending and stuff, but I remember like I've beaten it,
Mm.
and it was when I was an adult as well. And I played it when I was younger, so I maybe I'm mixing up the memories. Like I don't really remember, but this is not my first time through the game. I do remember the pain points. Definitely this spider is brutal, and then I remember Sigma at the very end was
Mm.
pretty hard. Although once you get the pattern down, I think his first couple forms are okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a bastard.
Yeah, he's pretty brutal. And back when I was a kid, I didn't own it. I would rent it.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a situation where, like, if you didn't beat it in the weekend, next weekend, do you rent the same game again, or do you choose something entirely new? And
Yeah.
more often than not, I would try new games.
Right.
But yeah, I guess kind of in the same boat. My kid is starting to show an appreciation for games too. So I booted up a game called Grow Home um, this weekend, or maybe earlier in the week. I can't quite remember. But
You did mention last time we spoke.
well, I tried that. Yeah, so I guess I tried that last weekend, and then we played it again this weekend. But I'd originally tried that back when last year when we were living in Vancouver, and so that's the first game that he ever held a controller and tried to press any buttons while looking at it. And
Does he understand what he's doing?
well, certainly the first time he didn't. Before he was 2 years old, he had no comprehension. Like he knew things were happening because he was holding a controller, but he didn't have the motor skills to make anything of that. But
Hmm.
yeah, this time around, he's 2.5, and he's picked up the controller, and he still can't accomplish any impressive feats. But he can intentionally look around, and he can intentionally make the character walk. And he was pressing the jump button and marveling at how his character was jumping. Uh,
Oh wow.
so it's I wish I had some more games that I could think of. Like maybe I do in my massive collection, but I wish I had some more games that were just completely no stress and like able to just give him the controller and let him play some stuff. Because I think that's kind of what popped this question into my head about what we're hoping to talk about today, which is death in video games. So in this game, you start on an island, and if you walk into the water, your robot character falls apart, and then you're immediately like respawn at like a teleporter type machine. Um, and my kid is completely fine with that. Like, is when that happens, he knows that something happened. He says, "Oh no!" And then you teleport, and he's like, "Robot rebuilt." So
Nice.
so he's happy about it, and it's an okay game because there's no challenges that are thrown at you. Like there's no enemies you have to dodge, for example.
Okay.
No spikes you have to avoid. Um,
Right.
so it seems like for a beginner, it's kind of a good place to start. But I guess my kind of curiosity is, what do you think of these days of death in video games? Like we kind of grew up playing a lot of games like Contra and Ninja Gaiden and whatnot, which are like super difficult. And I think there's a completely different approach to death in a game like that as opposed to a lot of more modern things such as like Fez, for example, where you die and you're just immediately right back where you were.
Right. Um, wow. Very open-ended question. I
Yeah.
mean, we obviously didn't prepare specifically for the topic other than deciding it ahead of time. I
Yeah.
was approaching it more philosophical, I
Mm.
guess. Like, what do I think? How do I think death should be addressed in video games, or like, uh, what's my preferred
Yeah.
way to have death? So I'm gonna see if I can tackle the question. Uh, hmm. We can cut some of the silence.
No.
Sure. Okay. It'll be a, it'll be a long contemplative episode this week.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, so like you've been playing Contra recently,
right.
and you were expressing that you're probably going to give up on that because it's just so hard. You keep dying. So
Well, yeah. So a preference I've had for at least that kind of like just really hardcore action game, really for like my whole life, kind of is infinite continues. I mean,
yeah,
why not? A game can just get progressively harder and harder and harder, and some people don't have the skill to be able to finish the game.
yeah.
So, like for example, I don't know. the hardest game I can think of that I've finished is the original Adventure Island. That game, I mean, it's beyond anything I've ever played in the later stages, beyond anything I've ever played. Like
Yeah.
Ninja Gaiden is not even close. Ghosts and Goblins is not even close. It's just incredibly difficult. And I think like it's not that it's such a popular game, but like if it
Yeah.
was, people would be discussing like how far did you get? Like I
Yeah.
can only get to this level. I can only get to that level. So I think you can design a game with infinite continues such that like that's it's not guaranteed that you're going to beat the game. Like
Yeah.
if you play a lot of arcade games, and you have enough quarters, you will always beat them. So
Yeah,
like you
exactly.
can take those arcade games, right, and port them to a home console system, and you're faced with a choice. You either limit the number of continues, or which can frustrate some people, of course, right?
Yeah.
Because they just want to play what they played in the arcade, and suddenly there's, I can only continue 5 times. Before I had like 20 quarters and I'd play farther.
Yeah.
Or just give them infinite continues, and then they beat it the day they buy it, and that's it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Contra is the latter of the two, I guess, where they have a limit of continues, and it's like it's frustrating, kind of. I mean, Contra's always been that way, but I don't know. Like some of the earlier Contras just weren't as tough. I would think I would prefer a tougher game with infinite continues.
Yeah.
It's just my style, maybe. So like Ninja Gaiden's, of course, a classic example. You could play that all night and not finish it, but that would be you're limited by your skill, not just like the number of continues, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
mean,
I think just sorry, kind of bringing it back to like pointing out kind of the difference between the older, more retro games or whatever and newer. I do see that a lot more in newer games where just you can just continue forever and there's no concept of like I ran out of continues, I'm dead.
mm,
Uh, yeah, I think. I mean, I mainly play retro games, as you know. Obviously, Contra 4 is a newer game, newisher game that's kind
mm.
of maintaining that. But I think it's meant to be like a throwback, right? People want it to feel like Contras.
Yeah, I think there was Ninja Gaiden 2, for example. I thought that worked really well. Like you said, you had infinite continues, but they did still give you a little bit of punishment with it. Like, if there's stage 5-1 and you complete that, but then you go to stage 5-2 and you lose enough times, then you have to go back to stage 5-1.
Yes, which is perfect, I think, because
I,
you
I,
you
I think that sort
yeah
of thing works because it's not, you don't have to play the entire game all over again like you did in Battletoads, uh, but it does give you just a little bit of a punishment that you have to really earn it.
yeah motivates you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although that's interesting too because that can be frustrating when you get to these later levels where like say there's 4 stages per world and
Yeah.
there's 8 worlds and like world 8 is just impossible
Yeah.
and it's 8-3 that's impossible. So you beat one, then you beat two, and then you try 3 million times, die,
Yeah.
continue back to 8-1. Like that can be frustrating going through that cycle,
Yeah.
which happens in Adventure Island. But interestingly, like Super Mario Brothers,
Yeah.
uh, the one and two, the original ones on the original Nintendo, like not with the turnips and stuff, but the one in the Lost Levels one,
Mm.
were exactly that style. You can continue, but you're back to world one of the 4 stages, or sorry,
Right.
stage one of four in the world. But then when they ported the game to Mario All Stars, Mario 2 or Lost Levels or whatever was considered so hard that they let you save
Yeah.
at the stage and not the world,
Yeah.
which was I don't know. I almost think like that would be an interesting approach to the game. You could have one big game, Mario X, and it could be that many levels, but maybe only in the later levels you continue at the stage because
Mm.
they know you're just going to be frustrated doing however many hard stages all in one jump.
Yeah.
I've never seen it done.
One game that I finished, I think, at the end of last year was They Bleed Pixels.
Oh, you finished it. I enjoyed the game. I kind of just played halfway, so yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, well, I remember I was playing that one, and I was playing that like while I was doing job hunting and stuff. So like I ended up beating that in the hotel, I believe, here in Montreal while I was like house hunting.
nice.
Uh, and that was an interesting game because that was a game that if they didn't have infinite continues, I never would have finished it. It was absolutely brutally hard, and it required like perfect timing for so much of it.
Mm.
But they had a really interesting system in that where it didn't save stage by stage or world by world. It saved in a way where, as you killed enemies, you were able to build up a save meter, and once it got full, as long as you were able to stand still and not have any enemies nearby, it would create a checkpoint for you.
Establish a save point, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think for modern difficult games like that, something like that definitely worked because you have to earn your checkpoints. It's not the equivalent of just having a save state, but
It's a
they
very cool
make it
system.
difficult to earn those checkpoints.
Yeah. Another, I guess, interesting example. Excuse me. Have you? I think we mentioned it before. You've played Gunpoint, right?
Yep, yeah, I finished that one.
Yeah. So, uh, not focusing on the game itself, but more just its system.
Mm,
I thought it was interesting where you can die, but you just start right back alive, right?
yeah,
But the challenge isn't in surviving the level without dying. The challenge is in, I mean, there was little parts where you had to do something clever to not die or whatever, but it was kind of a puzzle
mm,
game in a way, right? So where they did that for you, but ultimately it's still up to you to solve the puzzle optimally.
yeah,
Was interesting because then like simply not dying was no longer the main thing, and the fact they were giving you the gimme was okay because it was still up to you to do well enough to undo the puzzle and not back yourself into a corner.
right,
So I think yeah, it depends what the focus of like a lot of these action games is maybe.
yeah. So I guess that I was unfortunately trying to find it and I couldn't. There was an article I remember like 3 or 4 years ago on Gama Sutra that was specifically like, is death an overused mechanic in games?
Mm.
Because it seems like it's used as a punishment, and I don't know. It was a system that I just accepted as a kid. Like obviously, you're playing Mario, you die, and that's it. You have to start your game all over again. That's just the way it is.
Well, it's so
Um,
well established as like a pattern, right?
yeah. Do you find that you've got less patience for that now as an adult?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. It again, I think it depends on the way the game is structured, maybe. Like I'm talking about playing Rockman X again.
Mm,
It's fun, right? And it's exactly that system. Like I can see like if games if that trope wasn't established so early and the idea of like dying in a video game was a weird thing, it might be a very jarring experience to play Rockman. But like all these games since we grew up, it was all about like running through a level and not dying, right? So
mm,
it's weird. Just the perspective is what makes the difference, maybe. But certainly, I guess with newer games, like that's going back to say Gunpoint. If that was what it was all about, like you have to if you die 5 times, you're out of the game over.
yeah.
I would get frustrated because I'm playing the game not to like run through a level and do something awesome and survive and be like, yes, I did it. Like
Yeah.
I would play Ninja Gaiden or something, right? If that's what I want, or that style of game. If the point of the game is different, then yes, having death be like this significant thing can be quite frustrating, I think. And especially like newer games, indie games, I tend to look for more quirky games. So yeah, that can be quite frustrating as like a thing, I think.
Mm.
What about you? You're asking the question, so I assume you have some perspective.
Well, I think maybe I have less interest these days in those old school games like Ninja Gaiden or Contra, whatever. Like, I think these days I'm a lot more interested in games that have a narrative to it.
Yeah.
And one thing that I find absolutely frustrating is, any RPG I've ever played where they have a save point and then they have a massive cutscene or exposition in the story, and then you have a boss. And then you die to that boss, and you have to restore your save point, and you have no choice but to hammer the button all over again to get through all of the dialogue.
You
It's
know,
like,
that is so incredibly common. So incredibly frustrating.
I think that should be like gaming design 101 is like, if you are going to have massive amounts of story, have a save point afterwards.
Yeah,
not
Definitely.
before.
Definitely. Or let me click through it, right?
Yeah. It's and that's one thing that I've been finding really frustrating because I've been playing through Persona 4 recently. And there have been, I think, 4 or 5 occasions now where I've played the game through a dungeon for about an hour and then I die. And you just, you've lost all that progress. Uh,
That was always frustrating as well. Yep,
a-
I hated that.
and it wasn't so bad in Dragon Quest, for example. You die and you're resurrected in town and you've taken a penalty of like half your money or something, but you still have all that experience that you've gained and whatever items and stuff you found. So
Yep.
it didn't feel like you've just thrown an hour out the window. Whereas with Persona, it's really frustrating, and it's like it, on the one hand, it makes the dungeons more tense because you know that death
You're
has a
stuck.
stronger penalty to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really frustrating to get to that point where you've put an hour in and then you start a fight, and the enemies get first strike and they just kill your main character before you get a chance to do any sort of reaction. And
Mm-hmm.
in that particular game, if your 3 allies die, you get to keep fighting. But if your character dies, that's it, game over.
No fun. Yeah, that's brutal. I'll pull back to my typical like way retro perspective, but
Mm,
I know you're not a huge fan of the early Final Fantasies, but some of those were like so unfair
mm,
with exactly that. Like, especially number two of all the games was just so unfair,
yeah,
so unfair. You'd go deep in this dungeon, and it's got like 8 floors or something, and you get to like the seventh floor, and there's just two paths, and you're like,
yeah,
okay. Like, and this is before they came up with save points.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so you
yeah.
go down one path and it's the wrong path. So guess what the result is? It's like this enormous golem thing that won't let you run away that kills you in one hit. Okay. So flip a coin to
Yeah,
redo the level or not, right? And you've been there for like an hour and a half, hacking at this level. Or like they'd have like treasure chests. So you walk into this room and there's 3 treasure chests and you
yeah,
open the first one, it's this great item, awesome. So of course you're gonna open the next two. Open the next one, and it's like a golem jumps out, and it's insta death,
yeah,
and that's it. It's like remember like I think we talked about them, deja vu and stuff, like
yeah,
the old infocom games where it's like you choose to go right at the wrong time and just die.
yeah.
It's like exactly that kind of mechanic. I mean, that I have zero patience for that. I never did, but like now, of course, as like a busier adult person, it's just come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Can you imagine if like in Mario Kart, if instead of Lakitu coming and rescuing, you were just dead when you drove
That's
off
it.
the side?
And then they put courses like Rainbow Road at the very end,
Yeah,
so you'd have to like replay everything constantly.
yeah. I don't think
Yeah,
that game
that
would
would be
have
brutal.
caught on.
Yeah, it definitely not with me. It wouldn't have.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
yet,
yeah,
to a large extent, that's what a lot of racing games are like. Like, if there's a lot of racing games where if you wreck your car, that's it. It's game over.
your career is done. Yeah, I don't play a ton of racing games. That must be. I mean, that kind of thing is definitely frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably all about balance too. I mean, some people want realism, right? Like I'm kind of a fan of realism when it's something I really like.
Yeah. A
I'm
flight simulator.
yeah, sure. That's not exactly something I like. I'm trying to think of a really good example. Maybe SimCity. I
Yeah.
mean, not that that's super realistic, but it's not like magic things happen. It's modeled kind of realistically, right? So
Yeah.
I'm happy to have that realistic experience. But if it was racing, I'm just not interested in cars and racing. So I just want something more like Mario Kart that's silly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Some people want that permadeath experience, I guess.
Speaking
Um,
speaking of permadeath, Fire Emblem.
Fire Emblem, yes. Final Fantasy Tactics, Ogre Battle.
So that's one thing that I find interesting though is like if because I'm playing Final Fantasy Tactics right now as well,
Hmm.
and I feel like as far as a tactical game goes, that has the perfect solution. Uh, because in Fire Emblem, if your character dies, that's it. Like there's no chance to resurrect them.
Hmm.
They're gone.
Right.
And so the average person that plays that game as soon as you lose your character, they just reset it and start the battle all over again.
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, so I think it's better with Final Fantasy Tactics because when someone dies, you've got a timer and you've got the
Yeah.
ability that you can go and you can resurrect them. And they also give it so that there is a potential advantage to letting someone die because they leave those little crystals behind where you can learn their abilities or get a treasure chest or whatever. So it's like I in that particular game I was much less likely to restart than I was in Fire Emblem.
Right. Uh, well, would you prefer that it not be permadeath? Would you prefer like just they never expire and at the end of the battle everyone comes back?
Maybe. Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
You know, I
I
think go on.
I did play through Valkyria Chronicles recently, and that was the system that was there, I
Mm,
believe.
right.
Uh, or maybe I was just so awesome that I never had a character die permanently. Um,
Well,
but if you have a character who's central to the story at the very least, if they die, then they're still you're still able to use them in the next battle.
right. I see.
So I don't know. It's fun. I feel like as long as the overall game mechanics are fun, I don't know. I think there's a problem when you have a game like Fire Emblem where your choice is to restart the battle because you lost a character.
I agree. I think it's a weird trade-off because I actually like permadeath in that I think it makes it more interesting. It's more like you care about the
Mm.
characters a lot, like kind of like what you're saying in Final Fantasy Tactics, where it's like maybe someone died and it would be advantageous to not resurrect them because it's your only chance of winning the battle, or because whatever other reason,
Mm.
you just resetting is a disadvantage, or you're not as confident that you could beat this battle or whatever, right? For whatever
Mm.
reason. And it just adds an interesting element, kind of. I do understand why it's super frustrating, but maybe I mean I just like simulations or some
Yeah.
element of that is interesting. So if death is not this trivial thing that doesn't matter, um, I don't know. It makes things tense, and it just makes the story, like your personal story of playing the game, unique. Kind of like for me, that character died at this stage, and then I get this other character who was strong and whatever, right? Like versus someone else who might have carried some character through the whole game or something, right?
Mm.
Um, but of course, I mean, it's just very, very hard to maybe make a game and do that well because
Yeah.
it's just. I have played many, many games where that's just a very frustrating thing, right?
One thing that
So
I've always found weird is that you've got a game like and sorry to spoil this game that's like a decade and a half or more old, but Final Fantasy VII.
I actually wanted to bring that up.
You've
I know.
got a world that exists where you're constantly in battle and people are constantly dying and you're reviving them either with materia or with items, and then all of a sudden halfway through the story a character is killed and that's it, they're
And they're
dead.
killed, really killed. And every single person that's been playing this series forever asks the question, why not Phoenix Down? What's going on?
Yeah.
It's just inconvenient for the,
it's
the touching
it's
story they wanted to build.
it's so weird to build a world where in your lore you've got the ability to resurrect people and then you have them die permanently due to the story.
They could have done like, I don't know, it was like Superman's kryptonite, or something that
Yeah.
especially kills someone so that they're really not coming back or something. That was
Yeah.
actually exactly for the reason you brought it up. A reason is why I was thinking of kind of mentioning that particular game. I mean, what I like, this goes back. This is what I was thinking of talking about more, the philosophical kind of the approach to death that the
Yeah.
game takes. I actually so look at Rockman, for example.
Yeah.
He dies a million times when you're playing, but like we assume that that didn't really happen, kind of, right? Like
Yeah.
if they adapted Rockman X or Mega Man X or whatever into a comic book or a movie,
He
which would be
wouldn't
ridiculous,
die.
but if they did, he wouldn't die like 4 or 5 times and then just come back. Like he just,
Yeah.
the kind of canonical, like what actually happened when you beat the game is that he just actually never died, and
Yeah.
all your times you played and died just weren't real, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like in Final Fantasy VII, people are really dying and really coming back to life, and then one character is really dying and that's it for
Yeah.
some reason. It's just like they're just kind of, I don't know, they're trivializing death in a way.
Yeah.
I almost like the Rockman X approach, where they're not really dying, because then
Yeah.
you can, like, if in the narrative people die, well, they died, right? Even when I died earlier and came back because I had 3 lives, like that was just a story arc that wasn't real.
Yeah.
Whereas in Final Fantasy VII, someone died, you're still playing, the story is still continuing, and then they are resurrected. It's just weird to me.
Yeah.
And even like the old, like Dragon Quest games, like I think some of the Final Fantasies started like you don't die, you're like disabled from combat or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But Dragon Quest, you die, you are a ghost, or like they had you in a
Yeah. Yeah.
coffin or
Yeah. I
something, right?
remember that.
And they just you can. It was I don't know, it was cool, but it trivial. Like dying felt like nothing because you just bring them back to life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like in this world, like, do people ever die? Right? I don't know.
Only of old age.
Yeah, I
Uh,
guess
or if they're a villain.
diseased.
I mean,
I don't know.
that to me it never bothered me in Final Fantasy IV because you've got Palom and Porom who turn to stone and
Spoilers, man.
they
Spoilers.
can't be turned back from stone because it was something that they did of their own free will as opposed to a spell being cast on them.
Yeah.
And to me, then that made sense with Tella as well. Like he apparently dies because he overexerts himself with magic, and
And Sid, maybe when you think he sacrificed himself.
well, he ends up being completely healthy. Like he's healed in the dwarven kingdom or whatever. But to me, it
But I
seemed
understand, but you think he's dead, or
yeah,
you're led to believe that. So
yeah. And
I don't
it
know.
seems interesting because Sid falls from an impossible height into like potentially lava or something while
Yeah.
explosions are going off, and is somehow healed. Whereas Tella just he casts so much magic that he dies, and it's almost like the health points are completely recoverable via Phoenix Downs or whatever, whereas magic is your actual life source.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um. Interesting, I guess. Thought. I don't know if that was ever like, if you're reading into it that way,
yeah,
or if that
maybe.
was their clear intention with making it.
I don't know. Um,
Yeah. That game had a lot of death in it. I remember that.
yeah,
It's like all your characters are dying or almost dying, or like this town gets blown up and all the innocent people burned to death or whatever. It's just like, geez, man.
yeah. But two games that I wanted to mention while you were talking about the idea of like trivializing death, where you've got some characters that die and some that don't. A couple games that I think treated that interestingly. One is Rogue Legacy. Uh,
Okay.
I don't know if you ever gave that one a shot, but it's like a Castlevania style game, and the whole idea is that every time you die, you get to leave behind a legacy for your heir, and then they take up your
Okay.
quest where you left off. So
Okay.
so you can go through the dungeon and die infinite numbers of times, and every time a new hero joins, they're your descendant, and they've got like giantism or color blindness or some weird genetic anomaly. Uh, but it's interesting because it was a roguelike where the deaths are permanent but incorporated into the plot.
Yeah, that's a cool approach.
Uh,
That's actually kind of a silly, maybe, but
yeah,
super silly, but
yeah. Whereas most games that you play like that, if you're playing back to the original Ultima or whatever, you can die and restart. It's kind of like a roguelike. Like you go into these dungeons and get your items or whatever, and if you die, you're
mm,
resurrected and you don't have any of your items anymore. Um, but you're the same character.
right.
And
Um,
the
I
other
haven't
game,
played it, but it sounds interesting.
it's fun. It was an indie game, came out I don't know 4 years ago or so, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Cool.
Um, and the other one, which I never got around to playing, but I remember when back in 2013, I think you and I went to PAX.
Yeah.
And there was there was a talk that we went to, or at least I went to, with a couple of different companies, and one of the games that was being talked about there was one called Life Goes On. Um,
Not
and
ringing a bell, actually.
it's kind of like a puzzle platformer game as well, and the idea
Mm,
behind that is you have to use your characters for their descendants to finish the dungeon.
Like
Yeah,
this character
like
had to
if
have sacrificed himself in this place for it to
yeah,
work out
so like
versus
if there's
okay.
a pit of spikes that you can't jump across, you jump onto the spikes and you die, and then the next
And then
person that comes along gets to use you as a platform.
okay, okay. I don't know if trivializing death is the right word, and perhaps
No, I think it's
incorporating. Yeah,
yeah, I think that it's like the opposite of
yeah,
trivializing it.
yeah.
It's like it's making it. They're firmly acknowledging that you have died.
Right. Yeah. Have you played much of the original Lemmings?
I
I think
think I
you
beat
were
the
not.
original one. Well, the Super Nintendo
Okay.
version.
Sure. Well, anyway, that's I mean, kind of in the same vein a little bit, but like you had to rescue X percent of your lemmings, and
Yeah,
sometimes to rescue them, some had to die, right? Like one guy would have to dig through the ground and fall in lava and melt, or whatever. Just the way it worked was you just in some levels couldn't rescue everyone. It was just worked into the puzzle design of it. So I mean, that kind of was trivializing death because they're these stupid creatures you don't really care about, and there's just a number on them. They're almost like points, kind of,
yeah,
right? But uh, yeah, I don't know. Incorporation of death as a meaningful mechanic is kind of interesting, perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Um. Yeah.
all right. So, what are you playing right now?
Well, I actually was getting rather into Rockman X. I know I just mentioned it was something I was kind of doing 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there,
Mm,
but I don't know. It's been fun to play again. So I think I'm actually going to play through that series again, uh,
nice.
as I don't know, introduce games to my young one.
Yeah.
That works for me now. Is games that I can do in short bursts, uh, games where um, it's interesting enough that my daughter can watch it and not get super bored. So portable games are hard because she wanders away from them. RPGs, she gets bored or would get bored, I'm certain. So probably stick to that and similar games. So gonna go through Rockman X, and then probably maybe I was thinking of taking a stab at Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which is bloody impossible, but
Yeah.
I do know someone who's beaten it.
All right. So obviously, talking about death and difficulty in games, you're not turned
That's
off of playing anything.
yes. How about you?
I'm actually playing through a ridiculous amount of games all simultaneously at the moment.
Nice.
Um,
I've been there and done that.
yeah. So I still, you know, almost 3 months in now to Persona 4.
Okay.
So I think I'm about 3/4 of the way through the game. Um, finally moved my PlayStation 3 in front of my exercise bike, so now I'm trying to keep pedaling while I play.
Do you find
Um,
it works? Your brain doesn't just shut off one of the activities?
it depends on what I'm doing. Like if I'm trying to actually read the story and focus on it, then it's like
Reading's exactly the one. I find when I'm reading, actually, I just stop pedaling.
yeah. I basically would just stop pedaling, and then once I'm able to walk around and do like buying items and stuff again, I'm fine. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's weird, but pedaling the whole time I'm doing fights and dungeons and stuff is better than just sitting there literally doing nothing with my body.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I used to exercise a lot while playing Final Fantasy VIII. That game. And sorry, I'm breaking into your story, but you'd if you remember this game, which I hate so much, but like the whole second half of the game, all you'd ever need to do in a battle was just use all your GFs, and then
yeah,
you'd watch all the pretty animations, and you'd win
yeah,
every single time without failure.
yeah.
So since I didn't care about the game and it was not interesting and it was broken, I would literally do that for every single fight. And while the big, long, ridiculous, like full 1 minute animation or whatever is happening, I just exercise. So the game was so, I don't know, like my input was so unrequired that I spent more time exercising than like pressing buttons playing Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I just did a quick search, and I don't think this is the long. Oh, I think Arc in Final Fantasy 9 may have been the longest, but yeah, in Final Fantasy 8, the Eden Summon. There's a YouTube video here that's 2 minutes 22 seconds.
Christ.
So I, I I haven't clicked on it to confirm whether or not that's like slow motion or the whole video or what, but
Oh
uh,
man, that whole game, man. That's gonna be yeah. Anyway, please,
it starts at
let's move on.
34 seconds and goes to 50 seconds. Okay, so it's it's only about 16 seconds long, but still that's if you have to watch that more than one time, that's pretty not fun.
I'm not sure if there was summons that were longer, but I mean, when you're in this supposedly like fast-paced battle and you've seen that animation literally hundreds of times or
Yeah.
whatever, it's like, yeah, 16 seconds, I guarantee feels like a full 2 minutes easily.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, anyway, I'm working through Persona 4 and then through my lunches I'm generally playing Endless Legend, which is a fantasy themed game that's somewhat similar to Civilizations. Um,
Okay.
and I guess that's actually something that had kind of spurred my thought process on death in video games because it's kind of interesting in that you raise your armies, you have individual units that you make, and they die and they're gone. So it feels somewhat important to keep them and use them carefully. But
Right.
at the same time, you also have heroes, which are much harder to acquire. But when they die, they just go to town and have to heal for a little while before you get to use them again.
I see. Got it. Okay.
So that
Interesting.
that that seemed kind of weird to me. Uh,
Yeah, you'd feel less afraid to throw your legend into some risky battle than these troops you've spent all this time raising up, right?
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and so then I'm also playing Final Fantasy Tactics at the same time on the on
Right.
the on the PSP during my commutes. And then every now and then I convince Andrea to play a game with me. So we've been playing Ibn Ab.
Nice.
And then with my son, I've been playing Grow Home.
Cool.
So
Wow. You do. I did exactly this for quite a while, where I had a different game per like kind of time block in my schedule because I was in a different place, or
yeah,
this is my portable game time. This is my with somebody time, etc., etc.
yeah, yeah.
I am still playing Zelda, Super Nintendo Zelda with the wife. We took a long, long, long break, mostly because new job, got
Yeah, yeah.
busy, had to travel, blah blah blah, and I don't know, new baby is on the way, so it's kind of the countdown is on if we're gonna finish it or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So that's still kind of ongoing.
Yeah, I was, I was gonna say, it's not that bad at first because when they're young enough, you can get to just like kind of hold them in your lap, and they'll fall asleep in your lap while you're watching a movie or whatever. But you guys have a second kid this time around, so
Exactly.
good
You're
luck with
depending
that.
on things syncing up
Yeah,
with some consistency, which is a huge assumption.
yeah,
Yes,
uh,
yes, yes.
yeah.
I
So
Yeah. Before we conclude here, I don't know why it just feels very related to me, even though it's not explicitly death, and it's back to this game I hate so much. But do you remember in Final Fantasy VIII, the pointless, really frustrating card game you could play with people randomly that was annoying?
yeah,
Yeah. And how when you like lost the card game, you'd lose one of your cards.
yeah,
Yeah. That to me was exactly kind of like an example of permadeath done wrong,
yeah,
because I mean, it wasn't permadeath, but like it's like a strong character in Final Fantasy Tactics dying, and then they're not on your army anymore, right? Like you lose that card, and now you're guaranteed not to win anymore if that was like your one good card, and there's a lot of strong players you
yeah,
need to fight or something, right? And to me, part of the reason that it was so sucky was, I mean, it was a side quest, right? Like this card game is not the main thing you're doing, so like. I don't know. I'm not saying like since it's a side quest, just make it super easy for me. But like if I'm gonna have to deal with something with like such a big hit, it's of course just going to turn me off the activity, right?
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people were. I don't. I think it was the version that was in 9. A lot of people apparently really love that, but I don't know. I'm not big
I
on it. I
it's
when it comes to 8, I enjoyed a lot of the music.
I hated the music.
I think Umatsu did a decent job. Um,
Oh, I hated the music. I really, 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 really enjoyed the music in the demo, which I found out later was just ripped directly from the rock, which then they changed into a entirely
yeah,
uninspiring
yeah.
tune. And then I
That
think
that was my
Laguna's
favorite
battle
track.
music was okay. What's that?
That was my favorite track. It was really disappointing that that wasn't in the final game.
Yeah, yeah, that was my favorite track. That was the only track I really liked. Laguna's battle music was interesting, I guess, or
Mm.
I don't know what the right, like the
Yeah,
that one, that one.
yeah.
Yeah, everything. I hated like the Balam Garden like elevator music. I
Do
hated the
do do
overworld.
do
I
do
hated every.
do
Ah, stop
do.
it. Ah, I hated everything. All of it. All of it. All of it.
I, I
God.
I liked the music during the boss of the game. Uh,
Um,
it
I'm
starts
sure
off
I'd
with kind of
remember
like
if
an
I heard it.
acoustic guitar thing. Uh, I don't know. I had that was the only redeeming thing. And to be honest, at the time, I thought the computer animation was out of this world. Like, uh, if
I
if
still think it
if you
was
compare it
impressive.
to the stuff that was in film at the time, like that was a little bit after Toy Story and stuff. Like, I think the actual technology was good, but when it comes to anything that was remotely related to the plot or the
Or the
gameplay,
setting, or any of the visuals,
yeah,
or any of the characters, or the gameplay. Yes.
yeah, uh,
Yeah, I'm not just like I stress I'm not just being hard on this game because it's like funny or something. Like I could go into details about why I hate every aspect. I
okay.
just that game for me is it really didn't do it.
I, I
Really, really everything.
I think we've talked about how much we hate that game so many
Uh,
times that
We could piece together many conversations into a
yeah,
coherent
we'll just edit
novel.
them all together into a
I-
podcast.
just read them. That'll be the podcast.
Yeah, it'll just be clips of us saying, "Man, remember that game we hate? Let's not talk
Uh,
about that."
yeah. Speaking of death, man.
Yeah. Actually, did you ever read the theory that the whole idea behind that game is that you die during the little opening animation, and that the whole game is Squall's imagination as he's is dying?
No. Is that something someone just made up, or is that like a
Yeah.
legit
No,
thing?
it's not canon by any means, but it's a theory that someone like wrote a really long thing about. Squall dead. Oh no, one of the second result that comes up is Squall's dead debunked.
Uh,
Sad. Okay. Anyway, uh, I think just to finish off, I think death can be very good, but I think if it's going to be used to punish the player, you've got to just be careful that you don't punish them so hard that they want to give up on the game.
Yep, I agree. And I like it when death is not trivialized through the story or just the setting or whatever. And I also like it, like the Final Fantasy VII example is pretty key where they desynchronize the gameplay with the narrative. I hate it when that happens.
Mm.
It doesn't take just death to do that, but I mean, it's an easy way to do it
Yeah.
since so many games you're dying as you
I
play
feel like
over.
that they could have handled that better. Like a sword through
Yeah,
the stomach shouldn't kill someone in that world. Like it
yeah.
should take something bigger than that.
Yeah, they could have written something in, right? She could have, I'm just going to make something off the top of my head. She could have been from a line of I don't know, like it's kind of like some there's a way you can permanently banish people,
Mm.
like kill them, and that she was killed in that particular way or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Cool.
Good talking with you.
Till next time, mate.